finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized SEMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a SEMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Good evening, professional colleagues. Good evening, friends of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICAN, the Noble Institute. Good evening, our students, ladies and gentlemen. Give me great pleasure to welcome you to another session of ICAN on Air. Today, Tuesday, the 21st day of the month of February, 2023. Sincerely speaking, I bring greetings from the 58th president, knowing fully well some of the challenges we're facing, and he extends his greeting that we should keep the faith alive because it's a passing phase. Definitely, there will be light behind the tunnel. And today, we have brought before you a germane topic, which is a contributing factor to the growth of our economy. And we are talking about subnational IGR and citizens' well-being in Nigeria. I'm sure we all know how important and strategic IGR is to subnational, and how do we match it with the citizen well-being. To do justice to the topic of today, I have an erudite professor, a seasoned professional, Professor Martin Ike-Muonso, who will be discussing this topic with us. And I have to tell you that Prof. Martin is an international transformation, public policy, and public finance management expert with robust experience in investment banking, academia, and economic development. He is currently the Chief Executive Officer of the IGR Initiative and the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Value Frontier Limited. Over the last 6 years, he has focused on supporting organizations and the public sector with revenue expansion and performance transformation. In 2021 and early 2022, he led and designed the implementation of internally generated revenue (IGR) expansion strategy for Bauchi, Sokoto, Akwa Ibom, Adamawa, Ebonyi, and Gombe State in a due USAID fund state-to-state program. He is a columnist in the Business AM newspaper focusing on internally generated revenue initiative for national, subnational government. Currently a visiting professor at the Institute of Peace, Conflict and Development Study of the Enugu State University of Science and Technology. He holds a PhD in Business Economics from Esudai University Institute in Argentina and a doctorate in Business Administration from SMC University. He has authored 5 books. Some of them are The Ground Rule for Subnational IGR Expansion, Nigerian Cloud of Fear and Death, and Holding Africa to Prosperity and Addressing Nigeria Governance Failure are a precondition for economic prosperity. I can tell you that this evening We are a professor to enrich our knowledge base on the IGR that you and I know that is very of much importance to the subnational. But like I keep telling you, I need to make sure that I have my own IGR from the ICAN on air. And the only way you can do that is by making sure you bring your goods and products, services for us to promote it for you. And I can tell you that you get the word acknowledgement that is expected and the patronage that is expected. But before I bring in my guest, let me quickly go on a very short break. When I'll be coming in, I'll come in with my guest and we're doing justice to the topic of today. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned and I'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome back. And great pleasure to have my prof with me on ICAN on air this evening. Professor Matthias Ike-Muonso. Good evening and welcome to ICAN on air, sir.
Good evening to Oluseso, and thank you, the team of ICAN on Air. I'm glad to be with you today.
Yeah, let me just tell our viewers that I'm connecting live and direct to my prof all the way from Enugu State, the cold city. And we'll be talking on subnational IGR and citizen well-being in Nigeria. Prof, let me start this way because I've gotten my pen and paper, and our guests, my viewers too, are ready to learn from your word of experience. Let me start this way, Prof. Nigerian citizens have been groaning under serious economic pain, and their current well-being qualifies to be described as abnormal and painful. This is the best time to have an erudite scholar of your standing to talk to us globally on today's topic. Let's start this way, Prof, by saying what is the difference between national and subnational government? And what is the interface between subnational government and national level of government?
Okay, again, thank you for inviting me. Let me start from. I mean, Nigeria has a three-tier structure: the federal, the state, and local government. And if you bunch all that together, we have one country. if you dismember it into those three tiers, we have one which is almost like a father or like a parent to all others. And you can look at it from 2 points. One is all of us coming together as one family, which we call federating, and that one staying alone as a father, which is federal. So that is, you can bunch that as the national, the federating all of us together as national. When we are different, when we are separate, the states and the local governments are like the sub of that national. So they are not national, they are subunits of the national. So that is, in some simple way, how to explain it. So there are subs, they are also not sovereign. Sometimes you can call it sub-sovereign, not fully sovereign. And so that's the way to look at it. And the relationship is, like I said, it's like I hope we discuss something like that today. You look at some states or local government looking at the federal like a father, or something like that.
That's a beautiful way to start the show, having understanding of what the national and the subnational, using the example of parent, that is father to son. The son will always look up to the father for one thing. With reference to IGR, that is the internally generated revenue. Can you please explain to us the types of revenue that accrue to the tiers of Nigerian government and how they accrue to that? I mean, you spoke about the national, the subnational, which is the state and the local government.
Okay, like I said before, we have three-tier structure, under the federal arrangement. So each of these independent structures or independent tiers, each of these tiers are reasonably independent. They have constitutional independence. So they also have some kind of taxes or revenues determined by law or by constitution that they are entitled to collect. For the federal tier, you have things like corporate income tax, withholding tax, for companies or residents in the Federal Capital Territory. You have also petroleum profit tax. You have stamp duties for company transactions or company instruments. You have personal income tax of I'm talking about the federal now, the federal tier. You have the personal income tax of security personnel in the armed forces, residents of the Federal Capital Territory, and maybe members of staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, more like that. You also have the VAT, the VAT, and you have education tax too. So that's more like if you are looking at for the federal. At the state level, you have personal income tax. As a matter of fact, the major differentiating factor most of the time, and in fact, not in all cases, but it's a good yardstick to differentiate, is to look at the federal in terms of companies, corporate revenues proceeding from companies, and then the state for individuals. Because some of the items I've mentioned, for the federal, you also have variants of them at the state level. However, they pertain to individuals. For instance, the income of personal income tax, where you have the pay as you earn, and you have the direct taxes. You also have withholding tax but for individuals only. You have capital gains tax for individuals only. You have stamp duties on instruments for individuals only. But however, you now have things like road taxes. You now also have things like street naming, street registration, CFOs. You also have things like markets built by state governments, and a number of them, including development levies and things like Just more like that, like gambling, pools, and all of that. So at the state level, that's what you see. Then it gets more disaggregated at the local government level. Some of the things you also see at the state level, you also see at the local government level. But what happens is that most of them pertain to rural areas. For instance, if you look at the state level, you see that these are business premises. But at the local government level, you also have things equivalent, but they're not like business premises. I'm sure you have things like business permits.
Yeah.
They have things like penalties for wrong parking, shops, kiosks, signboard permit, advertising permits, abattoirs, and so on and so forth. Animal taxes. So the federal structure gives each of these constituent elements their own areas, revenue areas, areas that can derive the revenue. However, the difference or the differentiating factor among all of them now, maybe if you come to a particular tier, apart from the federal government, if you come to the states and local government levels, what then differentiates one from the other, or the successful or the more prosperous from the less prosperous, are a number of factors, including how innovative each of the leaders are.
This is great, and also taking us to all the types of revenue across board, from the federal to the state to the local government. Sincerely speaking, when you engage Prof on a live show like this, they give it to you because we consider them as a learned fellow, which we have to learn from. Let me go further, Prof, on this particular thing. From the angle of national and subnational government, can you educate our global audience to better appreciate or understand the concept of devolution of power or true federalism?
Yeah, just like I said, I mean, everything goes back again. First of all, we just understand that we have this three-tier structure or three-tier federal structure, and that each of them are supported with constitutional rights. So there are constitutionally guaranteed autonomy. So the devolution here is some measure of decentralization. In fact, you see that picture clearer when you begin to think about legislative lists. What is contained within the legislative lists. At the federal level, you have exclusive lists.
Yes.
And some issues that come within the exclusive list are things like defense, security, currency, central banking, sovereign debts, maybe international diplomacy, and a number of considerations in that. But in general, within the exclusive list, we have about 68 or 70, I can't guess, but it should be about 68 or thereabouts, items within the exclusive list belonging exclusively to the federal tier of government. However, there are some aspects, there are some of these items also that the federal and the state perform together or can operate, simultaneously, and we call them concurrent lists. There are about 12 of them, if I'm right. There are about 12 of them. And for smart leaders at subnational level, this is also where they can make some differences and outsmart others, assuming they are competing. For instance, if a state government or the leader of a state government or the governor, let me be more specific here, of a state government, develops some good relationship with the center or with the federal government, but he knows he needs more money to put in health, but he can get the federal government to solve its education problem. So rather than building a state university when a federal government has built a federal university, it can woo the federal government to build a university in the state and then use the money it would have used for establishing a state-owned university and deploy and put it in health.
In health.
In health. So it is taking advantage of this concurrent, the items within this concurrent list to um, to do more for the citizens and to achieve more for the citizens. Then the last one is what you have in your residual list, which is which is exclusively for state governments. So that is basically how the power is devolved, because within each of these legislative lists are the bunch of power. These are the bunch of what you can do and what you perhaps you can do, and also the federal government can do.
A beautiful exposition of the topic of today, which is subnational IGR and the citizen well-being in Nigeria. Guesting Professor Martins Ike-Muonso, and it's been a very interesting time. I proceed because the way you are digging it deep, I want to be going deeper with you so that our audience can get the thicker flesh. Not too easy to get across a prof like you giving us this insight into this. Staying with the subnational, can you please explain to us what drives this subnational IGR growth, and to what extent is insecurity, as we are I'm talking peculiar with our country, Nigeria, what extent is insecurity affecting the growth of subnational IGR in the present day that we are in the country, Nigeria?
Okay, let me start with, we have two questions here. Well, the first one is, what are the drivers? And the second one is, to what extent is insecurity impacting on that? So if we break it up, let me start with the first. The first is drivers. I have about 5. There could be more than that, but even this is 5. If we begin to decompose them, we can have more than 100. The first is what Professor Oshibanjo, the vice president, has articulated. Is always referred to as sovereign entity mindset. You see, the thing is that businesses, if you're looking at states or local government as a business, the prosperity of a business depends a whole lot on the leadership and the way the leadership carries that business. State governments are not different, or state economies are not different. Federal economies also are not different. So if you have a state governor who sees the state as a country, even though we know, as we explained earlier, that their powers exclusively meant for the federal government, which of course, again, the state governments also benefit from, because if you recall from the beginning, we said this is like a lenient father, the federal. So it provides security, it's for everybody. It provides currency, it's for everybody. It provides central banking, it's for everybody. It provides international diplomacy, it's for everybody. So if we set that aside, then we cannot, the state governor, the more it can look at the state as a country on its own, the better it appreciates the responsibility to care for the citizens, which of course is very primary to the what we call purpose for being, or the reason for being. If you regress backwards to the so-called theoretical social contract, the whole idea for even exploiting or seeking or expanding on the IGR is to be able to provide good governance. You want to high quality fiscal policy, fiscal programs. You want to be able to show strong accountability, build citizens' trust, get them to continue in the path of compliance. But to provide good governance requires a mentality that recognizes that the citizens truly deserve this, and that it is the responsibility of the leader to provide that. However, what we have had so far is more like that, and that is where I deviate or disagree with the vice president. We need to qualify it. If we say sovereign entity mindset, with entrepreneurial mentality. Because what I have is governors who see themselves as emperors, imperial majesty. So their words are law, their activities are almost like unquestionable. And in fact, if you dare question them, it's either they find ways of chasing you out of the state or, anyhow. But you understand me. So the first driver is a governor leading the state understands the health responsibility to satisfy that social contract expectations of good governance and the citizens' well-being by being very entrepreneurially focused. Now, being entrepreneurially focused means that you do those things that helps to expand IGR and helps to expand the services and the values, the value for money earnings that the citizens receive for being citizens and for contributing to the IGR in the first instance. The second driver is focused and strong revenue collection institutions. One of the biggest errors we've had so far is to consider that the IRS is almost like it. When you strengthen your IRS, for those who care to do that, a lot of state governments are only beginning to pick up after the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic that affected what they receive from the center as statutory allocation. That shock sent many back to begin to think of how to rev up the IGR, and they started thinking of how to rebuild or build or strengthen their IRS, that is the Internal Revenue Service. However, the Internal Revenue Service is only just one, and particularly is an aggregator of revenue generation. So there are myriads of revenue generating institutions within every state. And efforts are not made to do that. Yes, given that the IRS primary focus is to collect revenue. However, you can only collect what has been generated. Therefore, the state government, who is entrepreneurially minded, needs also to know that if I'm able to make universities to generate enough to cater for themselves, they may not come back asking states to fund them the way they come. If they can get the hospitals to generate enough and manage the resources they have, they may not need to come back to the states to ask for more. So you have a conservation of resources that you can deploy in other areas of need. So building strong revenue collection institutions, strengthening them and refocusing them to do what they're supposed to do is important. That's driver number 2. Driver number 3 is one of the most important consideration or drivers, which is the citizens' trust. You see, part of why we evade taxes, we all do evade taxes, in fact, in large numbers, because when you underreport, when you find smart avoidance strategies, it's even though it's not called evasion, but somehow we're just finding tactical means of dodging what we're supposed to do. Part of why that is happening is because of the level of trust we have in our government. We do not trust them. And the reason why we don't trust them that much is because of poor quality of fiscal programs, poor level of accountability and transparency. Therefore, if a government wants to drive IGR, it must go back to the kind of fiscal programs it designs and implements within the state, as well as be more transparent and show reason why citizens have to trust it. The fourth factor is what perhaps you keep seeing, which is more about comprehensive taxpayer enumeration, robust taxpayer database, process automation, and database intelligence, integrating your database, if it is comprehensive enough, with a whole lot of other databases that will give you even more granular insight into the earnings capacity of members of the state. So that is the fourth driver. Now, if you cannot do that, then you are not even ready to harness the potentials within, the state. Now, the fifth one is looking at the unique endowments of the state itself. You cannot begin to think about IGR within a state or within a subnational government without taking into consideration the unique capabilities, the unique potentials of the state. If my state is more of a cassava producing state, I guess the best place to start is to see how to rev up cassava production, have strong supply chain infrastructure to take those produced cassava to the market. Strengthen. So basically, that is a good starting point. Attracting investors to maybe build or establish cassava processing plants, flour making plants, starch making, and all of that to tap into that. Now, if I have that abundance of cassava, and then what you as a governor is starting off with is perhaps making me a furniture making factory, and you naming them as part of what you are doing, good, but it's poor fiscal programming. That is where the problem lies. So that kind of misalignment can also drive you down because you're not doing. And the final one is what I do not see them do. Most subnational governments do, and that is what we call the IGR expansion strategic development. I've been championing that. I've been even championing that because up till now, I do not see states devote time and resources to crafting strategies for IGR expansion. Now, if you have strategies for IGR expansion, it will go beyond the IRS. It will go to virtually all revenue generating institutions, in addition to all of incorporating all of these other drivers we have already enumerated or itemized. Thank you.
Sincerely speaking, Prof, when you give these 5 drivers, you are escapulated, you have put together all the lecture for today. And I feel like writing an exam. I can tell you, A1 is guaranteed because Prof has lectured us with all the drivers. You said 5, but you gave an addition, which we expected them to do. For those that are just joining us, I've been guesting Professor Martin Ike-Muonso, who have been doing justice to our topic of today, which centers on subnational IGR and citizen well-being in Nigeria. At this point, I must first engage my guest, and you can see that my guest is fully prepared. So I'll open the floor for a question from our audience, and I'll come to that so that I can link this particular question that is bothering my mind from where my prof made his submission. But the floor is open. I will start receiving your question. Prof, while you are giving those drivers, something came to bear, and I think this is just reality. We observe clearly that Lagos State, the center of excellence, has distinguished ourselves in the Nigeria subnational IGR. And while we can partially attribute this to the concentration of economic activities that goes on within the state, would you say that other states are falling short of ideas in turning their situation around themselves? Or what should other states, I mean those that are still trying to catch up in improving their revenue, what can they do differently, at least to close the gap? Because I can tell you every of the programs that I attend on revenue generation, you see Lagos State distinguishing themselves. What advice can you give on this before I open the floor to my audience for questions?
If you had paid attention to the drivers I mentioned and compare the history of Lagos IGR expansion, you would see that most of them are in operation or were in operation basically in what Lagos did. The first about sovereign entity mindset and entrepreneurial mindset, you could see that clearly in Lagos looking at itself as a sovereign. If you recall the Tinubu Obasanjo feud about
saga.
local government, and Lagos had to see itself as a sovereign and then began to think about how to raise funds to manage the state. That's one. So unless you go back for each state, any state that really wants to must put itself in that mold. You don't need to have an Obasanjo seize monies that will come to you. You just have to know that you have to raise funds to provide citizens with the well-being that they expect and that they have been paying for, and taxes and in the sacrifices that they have made. So again, Lagos has put a lot of resources in strengthening its revenue collection institutions. You should go and check it too. State government, other states should do the same. I mean, Lagos provides some good examples. So it's not just about, Lagos has markets. Lagos also may have that advantage. And I talked about the unique advantages of each state. Every region, every state is almost like a country on its own, with its own unique advantages. Lagos has its own advantages, yes, of course. But River State has its own unique advantages.
Yeah.
Anambra State has its own unique advantages. So you tap into your own and develop from that base. So basically, that's what. Again, if you look at taxpayer enumeration, taxpayer database, Lagos again leads in terms of digitalization of its processes. So states also have to go back again, because you cannot digitalize on empty database. So if you actually want to do and take, optimize or take full advantage of digitalization, then you must go back to the rudiments of database creation, which is taxpayer comprehensive, rigorous, robust taxpayer enumeration. You do that. You create a database. You also find ways of integrating database with other databases available, including the ones that you can even ask outside the particular base. For instance, Lagos asking other states if they could integrate their databases at some point. I know that Joint Tax Board has something like that, but it's not robust. Not robust to the extent of what we expect, some of what the state governments expect. The Joint Tax Board is doing its own best, trying to tap into, pulling information from across all the states. But states also need to do more work so that what is pulled together could be richer than it is and benefit every person, each of them.
You've alluded to it that all the drivers you stated earlier, most of these things we can see in Lagos State, and you encourage other states to look for ways to key into it. Most especially, having the citizen trust is fundamental. It's because it's when they trust you that they can part their money. And I'm this to say that I think just a few weeks ago, the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service and the Federal Inland Revenue Services had an handshake of sharing data within themselves so that you can nip. There is no escape route. So when you escape from state, the FRS is waiting for you. So if we don't collect it at the federal, definitely you must disburse that at the state level. I will proceed, and let me take the first question from Fatbol Latte, all the way from the ancient city of Ibadan. He's asking, curbing subnational government over dependency on central government for economic prosperity and survival strategy. He's asking, what are the way out of this?
Okay, you see, the first again it goes back to the same mindset thing. The first thing, if you see yourself as sovereign, then you act like a sovereign. And being a sovereign means you do not go cap in hand. Even if you're going to be going, you go with some dignity. You see, what we have had are states, and that is actually what has led to the very, very uncheerful performance in IGR terms, is because state governments had seen opportunity to solve some of their problems in the statutory allocations, statutory accounts allocation. So there's something there for them. They get it every month, and so they don't need to bother until they had a shock in 2020, and then there are a lot of the efforts. See, the truth is, the first thing for every state government, if you want to start this journey, is to say, look, I want to be independent, at least fiscally independent. I want to be able to provide for myself in full. And I have these responsibilities. I want to see, okay, even if I cannot do 100%, I want to be able to generate at least 70% of all that I need. And maybe the balance of the 30% I can scour from other sources. I can get from statutory allocation, and if that is available, and all of that. So that is number one. The others are those things I've enumerated. They are almost like the grand norm. If you really want to prosper in this area, then you have to go through them.
Sincerely speaking, having the bedrock on the driver that Prof has given to us is fundamental. And he mentioned one thing: you have to be fiscally independent. It's a mindset that every subnational government must take. I have AAA, that is Dr. Abel, are saying, all the way from the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, and he's asking the question that subnational governments are focused on raising IGRs rather than being agents of positive impact on people's welfare. What can citizens do to stop subnational government from taxing them into poverty?
Okay, fantastic question. Because I was thinking that is what we are going to be discussing today. Because the truth, we released the IGR initiative. We released a publication last month, and that was that states, state governments in the past 10 years, the annual average revenue growth, internally generated revenue growth, was about 30% for all, if you average all the revenue growth for all states. So from 2011, if you take on annual basis and you aggregate them for all the 36 states, excluding the Federal Capital Territory, they were growing IGR at approximately 30%. In fact, more than 30% on average. For 10 years. But now released the multidimensional poverty index. And you have almost like the entire country poor. So the question he asked is apt. So it's not denying it. Part of the problem is that, in fact, there's this program that started in 2018. It just ended, called SIFTAS, States Fiscal Transparency and Accountability, something program. And basically, what it did was to encourage states to be more transparent and to be more accountable, to show figures, and to do those things that citizens would naturally want to. And we saw some slight change in behavior of some governors, from some imperial mode, to some trying to comply. Not all did anyway. Now the program just stopped. We hope it lasts more than that, because there was a carrot of I think about 1.5 billion US dollars, taken from the World Bank and given as grants to state governments, to make them to change their behavior or to turn a new leaf. What has happened? The missing link really is, number one, the citizens are not up against those who derail their destinies. We have this complacency. One, because we also do not check the financial records, and two, because even the states don't provide these records. So if somebody, you guys are accountants, I'm not an accountant, But I know that if you want to make somebody not to know what you're doing in a company, the first thing is to confuse the accounts, to make it complicated, difficult to read, remove some information. So the person will struggle first to reconcile or reconstruct the data before I can begin to even make sense out of it. So before I can do that, I guess it wears off and it stops the investigation. Now, what has happened for a long time was that there's absence of data. So even citizens find it difficult to even know what is happening.
What is happening?
That's what part of what SIFTAS did. However, with SIFTAS stopping in 2022, that may as well also go. So rule number 1, citizens must put their foot down demanding information about how they are governed. They not need to know how they are governed, data on how their funds are used. You also want to find out on what basis were some of the fiscal programs, the decisions around fiscal programs taken. Why must you go and build a big primary school in a community where most of the kids there are overseas? And then in another community where they need primary school, you go and build something else. You go there and say you're building a vegetable oil refining plant. You know, even though you could say, oh, the man is working, he's put some things on the ground, but it's completely misaligned fiscal programming that is useless. It doesn't benefit anything, you know. You said?
I say, yeah, it's misplacing the fiscal policy or fiscal infrastructure in place.
So number 1, I think that's also where civil societies have to come in. Why I'm calling civil societies, organizations, NGOs, and all of that, even the academia, to come in at this point is because the state legislators are almost like appendages to state governors. You know, so one would have ordinarily have expected that in the spirit of separation of power, that the legislature should be able to curb some of those excesses, but they cannot, because they are appendages, they are beneficiaries, and they value their political loyalty more than the citizens that put them there in the first instance. You know.
Let me interject you here, Prof. And because on that civil society growth, I need to put up a question. Do you think that in all these discourse, they have a role to play in the IGR expansion?
A huge role. A huge role. You see, over the years, civil society organizations have proven, even though not all, have proven that they're concerned about a good society. So in some sense, you can look at them, for most of them that are concerned with how governments spend the money, how governments show transparency, how governments focus on how governments determine the programs they go into. Based on some of those things, you can look at them as the fourth arm of the government. And in fact, in some sense, a good replacement, if such a thing is possible, for some of our legislature. You know, so yes, of course, they have a big role to play. A lot of them have demonstrated, look at something like Budget IT, look at something like Governors Forum. They have used their money together with some foreign partners, development partners, to interrogate some of this data being presented by state governments, to also query some of them, to bring some of the things that citizens do not know about to the surface, and sort of challenge, put some of these people on check or on their toes to sometimes do what is right. And of course, they can also play a role in communicating to citizens, even if they don't challenge the government. But they can as well challenge the government, because some of them have done that, taking them to court or steering protests or protestations, I don't know if it's correct, against some of those unpopular programs. But more than that, they can be channels of simplifying the information about how they are governed and communicating same to the citizens, so that people know and be able to also raise their own questions, themselves on even benevolent level, at a benevolent level. They can also help in the capacity building of those working in government institutions, those have responsibility for revenue generation, those who are because the spending of revenue is as equally as important as generating the revenue. If you don't spend the one I've brought before, I'm very unlikely to disclose fully to you, so that what I have, so you don't have access to them in full next time.
Sincerely speaking, Prof, you've been doing justice to our topic of today, and we can see the important role of the civil society organization. But I'm sure you are familiar with the terrain we are as we coast up. This is election period, and in no fewer than a few days, we will be going to the poll. Assuming that we have a major aspirant watching this program, and I can tell you they have some of their essays watching to give insight to their leader. What would be your suggestion today on improving the subnational IGR and the citizen well-being in Nigeria?
I think the first thing is that if they are listening, I think the first thing is that they should go back and see themselves as entrepreneurs with responsibility to deliver well-being to their citizens, and they should also see themselves as managers of an independent economy. Meaning that the CEO. If you're a CEO of a company, you're not looking for anybody to give you money. You're not going to be crying to anybody to give you money to pay your staff. If you cannot generate the money, you shut down. So if you want to be a governor, you must see yourself as an entrepreneur, be able to raise the money, to be able to generate without, and of course, when we say raise money here or generate IGR, we're also not talking about imposing difficult, unnecessary burden on the citizens. And that's why we sometimes use the word optimize, so that there's a balance between maximizing revenue and reducing the difficulties that citizens, or in fact, maximizing revenue on one hand, and also fulfilling citizens' expectations from those in charge. And for me, that's essentially what I have to tell you. You don't need to be a governor if you cannot do these things.
That's a great one. The person must have the entrepreneurial mindset of not running anywhere, but be able to take the bull by the horn, generate the revenue, spend it, and earn the trust of the citizens so that they can do more.
Absolutely.
When they trust confidence in there, willingly they will be contributing to it. And I love the one you said that they should be manager of a sovereign nation. Sincerely speaking, each time I have an erudite scholar like Professor Martin's time will always be checking me here and there. And let me just apologize that I may not be able to take more questions while I just have this as parting shot. Prof, in closing, ICAN, my institute, is always open to ideas that will positively advance the growth of our members, the accounting profession, and the Nigerian business environment. Can you give us advice or suggestion to our institute, the professional and the intellectual ways of improving subnational level of government to increase the IGR and improve the citizen well-being? What will be your advice to the institute and the members of the institute that you are talking to this evening?
Okay, let me start by saying that even much of the successes that a lot of state governments have today are actually due to ICAN and some other professional accounting bodies. Because if you go to a typical IRS, you are looking for ICAN people or tax people or accounting people. Those are some of the people that eventually become like the professional tax people or auditors that are required in IRS. However, I'll put it this way. Number one is they continue that way. They help in building the capacity of the people working in revenue generating agencies of government. That's one. That's ICAN can do that on as what do they call it? It's called corporate social responsibility.
Yes,
ICAN
yes,
can
sir.
do that. CSR can do that, identify a state and help to do that. Number two, ICAN and accountants, professional accountants, can also play the role of that we've suggested of civil society groups to interrogate, look at their records of state governments and interrogate it and communicate same to citizens who do not have these skills to understand what is written there. You see, the more people, if once those things are hidden and people that are not accountants who do not have the skills to understand them, all of those things are closed there. Nobody can challenge them. They will tell you we've already produced them. So ICAN can play a role in that respect. That's another area, and I think that should be more like some of the most important areas that I think they can support this.
Sincerely speaking, it's been an exciting time with Professor Martin Ike-Muonso, who we have been engaging on the issue of subnational IGR and the citizen well-being. And I can tell you, you have actually educated our viewers this evening, and I want to especially appreciate you for sharing your evening with us on ICAN on Air. It's been an insightful and educative time. And we want to believe that when next we call on you, you will definitely avail us your time to share with us more of deeper insight into some of the things that our member needs to know. And let me especially appreciate all our viewers that are connected globally for sharing your evening with us on ICAN on Air. Apology if I'm unable to take one or two other questions that came in. It's always because of the want of time. And you trust that I will always do justice to all those things that come up. Before I bring the show to a close today, let me quickly remind us of a few announcements that we need to know about our institute. First and foremost, the institute on its own needs to grow its own revenue. And how do we do this? By the payment of our subscription. I'm sure you know that our annual subscription is due, and we expect that every member should make this payment. For the associate member, 17,500, and the fellow is 32,500. And we can tell you for free, you need not to look around for cash. All the e-payment channel is operational. Just visit the website and go to the members portal. You will do this seamlessly, and you get value for it. I'm sure you know there are benefits attached to early payment of this subscription. And also, let me bring this announcement that the fellowship conferment, which is the highest status of our membership in the institute, the portal is open. And if you are due, visit our website of the institute to have deeper understanding of the things that you need to know. But strategically, I need to tell you that when you are completing that form and making the payment, it's critical for you to belong to the district society, which is the subnational for the institute. And we've just spoken about subnational revenue generation. Let the district too grow by making sure that you belong to a district society. It's one of the compulsory fields that you must fill. On that note, we want to especially appreciate the 58th president of our great institute, the governing council of our institute, and also the editorial board under the leadership of Mr. Sheil Oderinde and all the editorial team members for coming out with this show today. I promise to be back on Thursday with another insightful topic. Then I'm your host, Olusegun Okunade, FCA. Bye for now.